Well, good evening, everybody. Thank you for coming tonight. My name is Andy McClellan, and I'm the senior pastor here at Damascus Community Church. And on behalf of our church body, we're just excited that you're all here. We have a real treat tonight to be able to hear Dr. Guliuzza speak. And so we'll get to him in just a minute. Just some housekeeping things for you. If you need to use the restrooms, if you go through these double doors and turn to the right down the hall, we have restrooms on the right and also a single-serve handicap restroom on the left. And so please take advantage of that if you need that. There is a table out in the foyer for ICR, so make sure to visit that as well. If you want information about the church, we have a welcome table in the back to the right. And so any questions you might have, I can answer those. We also have information there. But you're not here to hear me, so let me introduce our speaker tonight. Dr. Randy Guliuzza is the president of the Institute for Creation Research. He is a leading biological design theorist, if you all know what that is, and is actively expanding ICR's scientific research in the critical endeavor to develop a theory of biological design. He holds a Doctor of Medicine from the University of Minnesota and a Master of Public Health from Harvard University. Dr. Guliuzza also has a BS in Engineering from the South Dakota School of Mines and Technology and a BA in Theology from Moody Bible Institute. He was board certified in aerospace medicine, and he's a licensed professional engineer. What did you not do? During his career, he served as chief of aerospace medicine for the 28th Bomb Wing. Prior to that, he worked for 9 years in the Navy Civil Engineer Corps. Dr. Guliuzza is the author of multiple books and technical papers. Dr. Guliuzza and his wife, June, who's here, were high school sweethearts and have been married for 47 years. The greatest of all those accomplishments, huh? June and Randy have 3 incredible children with families of their own and are the proud grandparents of 3 boys and 4 girls. Would you please welcome Dr. Randy Guliuzza?
Well, Pastor, thank you so much for that nice introduction. And tomorrow, I will be speaking at the Design Science Association, and there is a brochure in the back. So as he has said, we're developing a theory of biological design. And that is a better way to explain what you see in biology rather than not just broadly evolutionary thinking, but more specifically Darwin's contribution to it, which is survival of the fittest or selectionism, natural selectionism. And that is the way of thinking that grips everyone's mind these days. And so we need to have a better way of explaining that. And the Design Science Association, they're the benefactors of bringing myself out here, and they have a meeting tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. And the information is in the back. The gentleman walking in right now, Mr. Mark Nelson, he has all of the information on that, so please talk with him. I think if you had the time, it would be well worthwhile. We're going to do a how-to talk tonight, but it's not going to be so much on the theory of biological design. It's good to see some younger people here today, so thank you for coming. You know, all of the young people in the crowd. There's a couple more in the back. What a joy it is to see that. Hopefully we'll get you some things that will be useful as you share a witness with your friends going forward. In fact, you'll see a bunch of them even in this talk. So tonight, how to. This is a how-to talk, and it's titled 5 Minutes with a Darwinist, Exposing the Fluff of Evolution. And FLUFF, you can see that's an acronym that is going to be something to help you organize your thoughts. I use it myself. When I do radio interviews, boom, fluff comes to my mind. Exactly what we're going to talk about tonight. Helps me organize it for radio interviews, TV interviews, those kinds of things. So if I'm able to use it, then you ought to be able to use it. But if you're younger, the title would be something like this. Your friend thinks he's related to a chimp. Now what? What are you going to do now that you've got something like that? And so you need an effective way. And as you can see, I'm aiming towards younger people here. An effective way to share with your friends, to talk with your friends. And most of them will be your friends. They won't be your enemy. They'll be your friends who believe in evolution. I was one of them. I'm now the president of ICR, but I guarantee you I believed it with all my heart. My teachers told it to me, and my teachers at the time I was convinced would never lie to me. I was also convinced the government would never lie to me either at that stage. And so you could probably just call me naive. But I thought my teachers would never lie to me and that what they told me was the gospel truth, and they taught me evolution. And so I believed it. I believed it for quite some time until my life was changed by picking up a subscription to this magazine. It didn't look like this, but it was called Acts and Facts. And when I was a student at Moody Bible Institute and talking with my friends, other students, and trying to convince them that evolution was true because I was a theistic evolutionist at the time, I found this magazine. Praise the Lord that Moody took this. It used to be like half this big. It was a mail-out magazine. And I had been an engineering student, as one of many other students, as you saw, before I went to Moody. And I was very interested in science, so I found the magazine on the rack at Moody, and I went back to the cubicle, waiting for my wife to get off of work, and I normally kind of tried to take a nap in the little cubicle. But I read an article by a man named Dr. Duane Gish, and it was on evolutionists trying to explain how life began without appealing to a creator. And Dr. Gish very conclusively and persuasively just crushed every argument that I had ever been taught in a 2-page article, just crunch, 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 crunch. And then he had another article about something that I hadn't even really thought about. And it was called, it's a geological phenomenon, or really a paleontological phenomenon, called stasis. In other words, when you dig up a fossil and you find its living counterpart, you find a fossil shrimp and you find a shrimp today, they look almost identical. You find a fossil ant, you find an ant today, they look almost identical. Some of them have supposedly been separated by tens of millions of years. Now, where's the evolution? They haven't evolved at all, and some of them have been separated by well over 150, 200 million years. Horseshoe crabs, 400 million years. You find a fossil horseshoe crab, you find one today, they look nearly identical. How can that be? How could it have evolved in such a short time and then stayed the same for 400 million years? And I thought, hey, that's a good observation. That doesn't make any sense. And so sitting in that cubicle at Moody Bible Institute, it was like, bang, this is true. This is right. And I remember saying, I've been lied to. I've been lied to. So this magazine right here, Acts and Facts, changed my life. Changed my life. I started living for this baby coming. And the year before I graduated from Moody, I called up Dr. Henry Morris, who was the founder of this ministry, and told him I'd love to work for ICR. And then he advised me to go on and finish my engineering degree, which took me on a long saga of education after education, because I kept asking, can I work for ICR? Can I work for ICR? And every time I asked, they just said, get more education, get more education. That's why I did it. I really hated school, but I wanted to work for ICR so bad that when they said, get more education, I did it. And then the day after I retired from the Air Force, I went to work for ICR, 28 years after picking up this magazine. So it was a saga. This baby can change your life. And there's a sign-up sheet in the back. It is free. It's always been free. As long as I'm president, it'll remain free. And it's really a very good magazine. It'll keep you educated on the science. You can pass it on to your kids, or your grids, and your grandkids, and those kinds of things. If you want, you can pick up this card. They're only distributed at our events. You can scan one of these things with your phone, or you can fill it out and mail it and drop it to us, and we'll put you on our list as well. So please sign up for that. There's another thing on the bottom right-hand side of YouTube. We now have a lot of YouTube podcasts. We just started a year or so ago on really doing them in earnest, and we've gone over 225,000 people who have now signed up for this thing. And so this will keep you informed on all of those things. Then we're also on these formats. I don't really even know what these are that much. They're not they're not what I do on there, but we're on it. And the people who are in our office that are younger, they have us, our presence on all of these. My slide is out of date. I'm told that one of those icons is not even real anymore. It's been replaced with an X. And so if that probably makes me up to date on this. And so you can follow us on one of these things as well. So I got admonished this morning at a pastor's breakfast. I was pleased that a person came up holding my latest book, and I thought, oh no, what are they going to say? And sure enough, I got admonished. It's called Aware and Prepared, and he said, this was nice. This is an outstanding book. It covers the latest things you're talking about in an understandable way about theory of biological design, plus a whole host of other issues. Why aren't you promoting your book any better than you do? What am I going to say? Well, I don't know. I just said, so I said tonight, when I get to the church, I'll show everybody my book and tell them, you need to get this book right here. It'll also keep you aware and prepared. All right, all of the free advertisements are done, so let's jump into the talk. Fluff. Evolution is more air than substance on those things. Well, what does all of those things stand for? This is a great talk if you want to take notes. It's a really good one. F, focus the discussion. So when I'm on a radio interview, boom, I want to focus the discussion and get right down to what we need to really talk about there. L, this is a cool phrase to work into your language. Less than persuaded. Less than persuaded. U, unobserved important events. Unobserved, very important events on that. F, failed mechanism for design. And then finally, the freedom found in creation science. And you can take these notes. I didn't look on the table. Mark, do we have this book back there on the table? Do you know? Oh, he's going to take a look. Doon, 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 doon. Pardon? The answer is no. Okay, there you go. So I was going to say, if you don't want to take notes, you could buy the little booklet, but evidently we didn't send it. So here it is. Focus the discussion, less than persuaded, unobserved important events, failed mechanism design, and freedom found in creation science. It's too bad that we didn't bring the book. I think this book is like only $1. And if you were like me, and I told you I hated school, I would have paid $1 and sat back and listened to the talk and not take notes. My wife, who's pretty obsessive, compulsive, she would buy the book and still take notes in those things. So, F, focus the discussion. Focus the discussion. Why? Because it's 5 minutes, so time is limited. And the main thing we need to do in focusing it is to define a couple terms. If we define these terms, we will set the tone of where we're going for the next 5 to 10 minutes, however, depending on how fast you talk on those things. So we need to define the terms, and we want to use a couple reputable sources. I was up at the University of Alaska, and sure enough, somebody challenged me on one of my definitions, and I was able to say, well, that definition is from the National Association of Biology Teachers. And the definition that this gal was challenging me on, she was one of the professors there, was the definition of evolution. Evolution. I mean, if we're talking about evolution, let's make sure we know what we're talking about. Some people define it as change or simply change over time. Well, who argues over that? Nobody argues over that. All of us believe that things change. Some of you have looked in the mirror recently and said, wow, have I changed on that? And man, I have really changed over time there. So there's no disputing that, but this we could dispute. The National Association of Biology Teachers claims that the diversity of life on Earth is the outcome of evolution. Now that I might argue about. Does evolution really explain the diversity of life on Earth? So in a radio interview, I'll say something like this. Now, very quickly, when I'm talking about evolution, I'm talking about a process that's supposed to be able to explain the diversity of life on Earth. And that's what I said up in Alaska. And she said, where'd you get that definition? I said, well, I got it from the National Association of Biology Teachers, 12,000 members. It's the largest biological organization in the world. Are you saying they don't know what they're talking about? They don't. But anyway, at least in terms of this evolution stuff, but she wasn't going to say that they didn't know that. So this is a reputable source, the National Association. Does evolution really explain the diversity of life on Earth? There's a good debate. Does evolution explain design of life? There's a debate. So this is the one from the NABT, diversity of life on Earth. And then second, when I'm talking about science, I would say something like, I hold that science is based on observation and testing. Why wouldn't I? That's what I was taught way back in 4th grade. Science is based on observation and testing. I now know that science is a way of looking at the world. The Bible is a way of looking at the world. That's general revelation. Scientists have a different way. And I'm saying it's a bad way, but it's a different way. It's a different way of understanding what's happening. So we put things to the test that we are observing. And a lot of times people will throw in the word repetition too. So observation, testing, and repetition. But to keep it really simple, I'll just say observation and testing. Someone said, well, where did you get that? Well, this is from the National Academy Press, from the National Academy of Sciences. And they say in a book called Science and Creationism, A View from the NAS, scientific investigators seek to understand natural phenomenon by observation and experimentation. I do this talk in Texas. So that's way too many syllables for a Texan down there. So I'll just say something like testing. Or if I'm down there, it's like testing, observation and testing. And it doesn't even have a G on the end of it. So it's like, so I keep it so that even a Texan can understand my talk on that. Scientific interpretations of facts and the explanations that account for them, therefore, must be testable by observation and experimentation. So when I'm up ready to talk, I'll say, now science is based on observation and testing. If it's not that, then it's not really science. So science is based on observation and testing. All right. This is a participatory lecture. Participatory lecture. It's Friday night. You guys want to get into something and not just kick back and relax and unwind from a busy week. You want to have a little bit of fun. So, where's my wife? She's not here? Good. She's out at the table. That means I can pick any side I want on this. Okay, we're going to have a contest. Obviously, the room is divided into two, so this makes it easy to have a contest between one side or the other. Pastor's on this side. Okay, so you'll fill the role of my wife, and at least for this and that will be you guys for tonight, and tonight only. You guys are the smart side. Smart side. Smart side. Smart side over here. Look at that. High fives for the smart side. Okay, you guys, let's see some high fives over here. You guys for tonight, and tonight only, are the dumb side. All right? So, dumb side. All right, high fives over here. Let's hear it for the dumb side. All right, 3 cheers for them. All right. Okay, smart side. Smart side. Evolution is supposed to explain what? All right. Okay, you guys are the smart side. Remember the smart side? Remember those high fives just a second ago? Okay, smart side. Evolution is supposed to explain I'll give you a clue, diversity of? Life. On Earth. There you go. All right. Diversity of life on Earth. Diversity of life on Earth. All right, that's pretty good, smart side. Okay, dumb side. See if you can do any better than that. Science is based on observation and? Did you catch that? I mean, that was like in unison. It's up there. The guy's pointing to between his ears on that. He's like, what is this up there? But observation and testing, observation, testing. All right. Diversity of life on earth, observation and testing. Okay. L, this is the phrase, less than persuaded, less than persuaded. Sometimes it's hard to remember those phrases, so remember the look. Look at this look. Does this gal look less than persuaded? Yes, she's less than persuaded. I've seen women make this look a lot. And that, in fact, I don't think men can do it on there. But women do it all the time. They're listening to something a man's telling them, and then suddenly the eyebrow goes up like, are you lying to me? I guarantee men don't lie to women. So, oh man, see, she's got the look. There, I saw it. All you have to do is just say that, and out comes the look on that. I should have taken a picture. I'll put it in my talk on that. Less than persuaded. Less than persuaded. That's a great phrase on that. Why do we want to use less than persuaded? Because, one, it kind of indicates we've been paying attention. We have been paying attention. I've been paying attention to what my teachers told me. I've been paying attention to the shows. And I don't want to get into an argument. That's the last thing I want to do with my friends when I'm talking about evolution. I don't want to get into an argument. So I don't want to say, and I don't want to kick off my discussion with, well, I just don't believe in evolution. And I have heard Christians say that so often. Well, I just don't believe in evolution. Well, that's kind of a showstopper. A showstopper. Then your evolutionist friends are going to say, well, I don't believe in creation. I don't believe in this, I don't believe this. And you're suddenly totally deadlocked, going nowhere. You might as well be in Congress or something like that. I mean, it's just boom, gone there. So we don't want to be saying those things. Less than persuaded means that we've been listening. We have been listening carefully. And saying that indicates you have been willing to be convinced. You've been listening. So if you've been listening carefully and you say to your friends, well, I've been listening to what they said, I've been listening to this, and I'm less than persuaded, maybe they'll be listening carefully to what you're saying. I mean, that's not an offensive term. It just means that they haven't convinced you of their argument on those things. And we don't want to use the word believe anyway, because believe just kind of like indicates more faith than fact on those things. I'm less than persuaded because when I open up my textbooks, evolution is supposed to explain the diversity of life on Earth, but what I get is huge diversities of the same kind of creatures. Open up your textbook. See if you don't see all different kinds of dogs or all different kinds of other creatures that they might have. It might be horses, it might be cats, it might be turtles or something like that. See if that isn't what they're showing you. But showing me all different kinds of dogs isn't anywhere close to explaining the diversity of life on Earth. They show me changes in the length of a finch beak. How does that explain the diversity of life on Earth? Show me the origin of finches. Show me a really undisputed origin of finches. In fact, better yet, show me the origin of the cells that can make finch beaks. Changes in peppered moth populations. We'll talk about that on Sunday morning and also up in Mount St. Helens. None of them have ever explained the origin of moths. They explain the difference in varieties, different shapes, and all these kinds of things. I can actually give you a design-based, an engineering-based explanation for how these moths are changing in frequency. It has nothing to do with selection. Nothing at all to do with selection. But they're not even close to explaining that. They're not even explaining the origin of moths. It shows similarities of body parts. I have a single bone in my upper arm, 2 bones in my lower arm, same as a dog, same as a cat, same as a porpoise or a turtle or any of those kinds of things. So we have similar bones. I have yet to turn to a paper that explains to me the origin of bones. Where in the world did bones come from? A bone, it kind of looks simple, but it's a very, very complicated, self-making, self-repairing thing. You know, there's more information to make a bone that's contained to make a bone than there is to run the entire city of Portland. May not be saying much, but nevertheless, there's more information than that there. On there. Resistance to bacteria, to antibiotics. Hey, bacteria is supposed to be so simple. Where did they come from? How do you explain one of them? Now, that's an incredibly complicated thing. So this is the evidence that I'm getting. None of it is explaining the diversity of life on earth, which is what you claim. So you claim that, but none of the evidences that I'm picking up in any of your textbooks is even close to explaining that. I'm less than persuaded, and even so my so-called closest relative, he's not buying it either, because when I read through the text, and you know what? Even when I read through scientific papers, I just get one story after another. You pick up Charles Darwin's book on the origin of species. It is one story after another, one imaginative story. Lots of speculation. And now with the advent of computer graphics, it's just everywhere. Some graphic filling in for a lack of evidence. You see a wolf-like creature walk into the ocean, and it doesn't drown. It suddenly morphs into a whale. And that's kind of funny, but kids watching it, young kids watching it, it looks like it could happen. Change, and out comes a whale. That's not scientific evidence. That's not real evidence at all. That's what we're picking up in the classroom, and that's what we catch on television all the time on there. So I'm less than persuaded because of all of those things. All right, quiz time. Here, let's start with the smart side again. All right, smart side. Oh no, now you're like worried on that. I see some of you trying to bail and get over on the dumb side all of a sudden on there. They're beckoning you to come on over. All right, smart side. Evolution is supposed to explain the? Good. Who was the ringer that shouted that out? There you go. That's the ringer. Diversity of life on earth. You just bailed out the rest of your team there on that. It's okay. All right, smart side. What phrase do you want to work out of your vocabulary that you don't want to say?
I don't believe in evolution. I don't believe in evolution.
Okay, there you go. But you forgot the well. I mean, if you're going to be down in Texas, you got to put the well in there. Well allows Texans to think of what they're going to say next. They'll like say, well, and then you can see the wheels are turning. The smoke comes out of the ear. Well, I just don't believe in evolution. All right, okay, dumb side. What phrase do we want to work into our vocabulary? We are? Did you hear that? It's like you guys are speaking in tongues, and they're like responsive reading over here on this. Less than persuaded. Great job, dumb side. Okay, all right. We're less than persuaded because science is supposed to be based on observation. Did you hear that? That was like and testing on there. All right, great job, dumb side. Okay, we're less than persuaded. Why are you guys like looking so chagrined over here? Where are the high fives now on that? Okay, there they go. They're back into it. Less than persuaded because of that's enough. Two unobserved important events. Two unobserved important events. How come you young people aren't high-fiving? How come they're having all the fun back there?
Well, they forgot repeatability, too.
Oh, they did? Who they did? Are you keeping score? There, we have the scorekeeper back here. Is he your husband? Is he like that when you play games with him as well? Oh, man. My wife's like that, too. There she is, right there in the back. Okay, unobserved important events. The good news, there's only two of them. All right. Unobserved natural origin of life. An unobserved natural origin of life. That's really a good one. Obviously, no one saw it happen, and no one's close to duplicating it, and no one can adequately explain it. Why? Even though when you turn on television and you open up your books, they make it sound so simple. Just the right little chemicals get together and water. Oh, water on Mars, water here, water there. You get those chemicals and you get water, and suddenly, bang, you've got life. And they make it sound really easy. If we just find water on Mars, on that. But that is so ridiculous. Living things, all living things have 4 characteristics. They must grow. They must be able to reproduce. They must be able to adapt, and they must be able to metabolize. Metabolize means you're able to get resources from your environment and build your body, or get resources and turn it into energy. You do something like that. And every single one of those, every one of them is hard. Every one of them is incredibly complicated with horrendously complex biochemical pathways. And every single one of them has chicken and egg phenomenon in themselves. Like, take reproduction. How does evolution happen until you can reproduce and get another generation? But until you can reproduce, you can't even get evolution going. Do you see what I'm saying? You have to be able to have a generation to do it, so you can't even get it going. And then in order to reproduce, you have to have mom's parts, dad's parts, baby's parts. We'll get to that. They all have these chicken and eggs. And how can you even reproduce until you have energy? Until you can metabolize? And how can you adapt to changing conditions until you are adaptable? One person says, well, you get your adaptability by adaptation. How does that work? How do you get your adaptability by adaptation until you're adaptable? You can't do any of these things. And that's why nobody is even close to explaining the origin of life. This Scientific American article came way out in 2011 by John Horgan. This is the title. Don't tell creationists, but scientists don't have a clue of how life began. And he was reporting on the largest collection of origin of life researchers at the time. Now, you can't really read it, but the first sentence of the whole paragraph says, exactly 20 years ago, he said, I wrote an article for Scientific American with that title, and his editor nixed it. But then he got to reprint it in 2011. So now we're over a decade later, he could reprint the exact same article. Another decade, I guarantee you he'll be able to reprint the exact same article, because nobody is close to explaining it. So if science is based on observation and testing, you can say this to your friends with total confidence. There is not a scientific paper published anywhere on the planet, by any research institute that documents by observation and testing a natural origin of life. It doesn't exist. That's pretty definitive. You say that to your friends, and they'll say, well, how do you say, well, I've never seen a paper. Nobody ever references the paper. Can you find the paper? And your friend won't be able to find a paper because it doesn't exist. Second unobserved mechanism is this, a mechanism with the ability to change one creature to a fundamentally different kind of creature. A mechanism with the ability to change one creature to a fundamentally different kind. Smart side, this will be your question. This will be your question on that. So get it down. I can see they're memorizing it. The guy who's keeping score, he's writing it down on all of these things. This will be it. So we're not talking about, just differences of dogs. Like, the egghead dog versus the football player type of dog on those kinds of things. We're talking about changing one creature to another. So in 2009, it was the 200th anniversary of Charles Darwin, and all kinds of papers were coming out about Darwinism. And this one right here came out. Evolution in Action, 50,000 Generations Salute to Charles Darwin by Richard Lenski. Richard Lenski was the professor running the world's longest running experiment on evolution at the University of Michigan. And at the time that this paper was published, it had been going for 35 years. And it takes E. coli, the same kind of bacteria that live in your gut. They reproduce them for a day. At the beginning of the next day, they take 10% of those and they put them back on the plates and let them reproduce. They freeze the other 90%. And then they do that for a day, and the next day they take the 10%, let them reproduce, freeze the other 90%. They did this every single day for 35 years. And when this paper was written, they were up to 50,000 generations of E. coli bacteria. And he claimed it was a salute to Charles Darwin. And I read that, and I thought, that's just pure propaganda for people who don't know any better. And they should know better. And if they read the paper, they would know better. Because after 50,000 generations, the E. coli bacteria were still what? E. coli. I mean, how is this explaining the diversity of life on Earth when after 50,000 generations, the bacteria are the same? They're not even a different type of bacteria. It's still E. coli. It's not a staph. It's not a strep. It's not anything close to that. They're still E. coli. This experiment went on and on and on. Eventually, it's been transferred down to Florida. And when it was transferred down to Florida, they were over 80,000 generations. And guess what it still was? E. coli. And do you know who wants this experiment to run? Not at taxpayer expense, of course, until the Lord returns? I do. Because if it goes on that long, I can make a prediction. These bacteria will still be what? E. coli. Or they'll have so many mutations they'll go extinct. That's what will happen. They're not going to change. After now, I suspect they're close to 100,000 generations, and these bacteria still faithfully reproduce after their kind. After their kind. Just exactly what the Bible says. So, that's why. All right. Okay, let's be fair, and we'll start with the dumb side. Okay, dumb side, we'll mix it up a little bit for you on this. Evolution is supposed to explain the... On earth. Good, good. Who yelled out on earth on that? He did. That's right. On earth, on earth. Extra points for the dumb side over there on diversity of life on earth. Okay, smart side. Science is... There you go, and repetition. All right. Extra points for you guys over here. Mark that down. Extra points for these guys on that. All right. We're less than persuaded because of two unobserved important things. One of them is an unobserved mechanism. An unobserved mechanism to do what? Change one creature to a fundamentally different kind of creature. There you go. Mechanism to change one creature to a fundamentally different kind. Okay, dumb side. The first one was, we're less than persuaded because an unobserved origin of life. There you go. Of life. Unobserved origin of life. Good. Now, this is the next one. Failed mechanism of design. This is kind of the hardest one of the whole lecture to get down, but in my opinion, it's the most important part. That's because when scientists look at creatures, everyone, nearly everyone, even thoughtful evolutionists, they all agree that creatures look incredibly designed. There's really no debate. You know, the really honest ones, they say birds look designed, fish look designed, humans look designed, creatures look really, really designed on all of those things. Creationists, we have the easy job. We basically say that, creatures look designed because they are designed. Creationists state that nature was designed by a real designer. That is the easy part. People are predisposed to believe that. People are predisposed that when they see something highly, highly engineered, that they believe it was engineered. And I could show you several studies that look at children all across the world, different countries all across the world, and particularly children between the ages of 6 and 10 years old, 5 to 10 years old, that age where they're starting to really start to put things together. And in essence, if you take children and you show them a cat, and you say, where did this cat come from? The vast majority of children will intuitively say, God made the cat. They just say, God made that cat. They understand that. They see that. It takes years of education to get that out of their brain. And so evolutionists have the harder job to convince people that what they see really wasn't designed, that it's only an illusion. It only looks like it was designed, but really wasn't designed. And in order to convince people of that, they come up with this basic equation. They said evolution, or the mechanism of evolution, is mutations, random mutations. And that's coupled with their mechanism of natural selection or survival of the fittest. Now, when it comes to mutations and random and natural selection, they're really not going to explain evolution at all. First of all, by their own choosing, they believe that these mutations are totally random. And so if you ask them, are they purposeful or are they random? No, they're random. They're totally random. Now, they do that on purpose because they want to work purpose out of their mechanism. So purposefully, they eliminate purpose because purpose indicates design. So they will be the ones who will be insisting that these mutations are totally random and nobody can predict them. That's wrong. We don't have a lecture on this, but I can guarantee you, I even covered it today at Corbin University. There are numerous papers out there which indicate that genetic changes which lead to adaptations are purposeful. They happen many times at the same spot over and over again on your DNA. They're not hitting anywhere and everywhere random, and they're not breaking things totally random. They're changing some things, some sequences exactly the same over and over again. So even though they insist it, the evidence is not for it. But now you know why they're insisting it, because they want to get purpose out. But the second part is true. Mutations that do happen as copying errors destroy information. They break information. They lead to diseases. Genetic changes that really do happen randomly, you don't want. Nobody wants them. And so when you go to your dentist and they're going to x-ray your teeth, the little dentist technician, it's usually a gal, she comes out with what in her hand? She comes out with a lead apron. And she throws it over your lap from about a foot up, boom, on that. Now why? Why is she throwing a lead apron over your lap? Because when you're getting your teeth x-rayed, you don't want to inadvertently x-ray your gonads. Nobody wants their gonads x-rayed on this and irradiated. So you protect them so that you don't damage the germ cells, the eggs or the sperm that are in there. So nobody wants what they're saying is the raw material for change throughout history. You do what you can to prevent it from happening. So their theory is really counterproductive. But this is the biggie. Natural selection. This was the concept that Darwin invented, which supposedly can change so many things, and it acts like almost like a real God. And when someone says natural selection did it, here's a little phrase, show me the selector. Show me the selector. And they're going to say, well, there really isn't a selector. And then you say, well, if there's no selector on all of this, then you can't even, and you shouldn't even be applying the label to nature if it can't really select. Why are you calling nature a selector? Why are you calling nature something that can favor? Why are you calling nature something that can act on? Why are they doing that? I'll tell you why they're doing it. Because Darwin supposedly got God out of the equation. Darwin supposedly got God's agency out, but he smuggled in a substitute agent, which was nature itself. Nature itself. And how does he do that? He does it in a very, very subtle way, which initially many scientists caught, and they pointed it out. You can't do this. Darwin compared nature to a human breeder. Particularly, it was a pigeon breeder. And he saw that pigeon breeders could select for various traits, and within several generations, they could get all different kinds of pigeons. Big pigeons, small pigeons, fluffy pigeons, not so fluffy, all these different kinds of things. Rose breeders can do the same thing, big roses, small roses. When you can purposefully, with intelligence and with an intelligent mind, select for traits, you can get all different varieties. So Darwin said, if a human breeder can get all of these varieties in a really short period of time, maybe nature can act like that breeder. And if nature can act like the breeder and nature is acting for a very, very, very long period of time, maybe they can get far more than just that variety of roses. Maybe they can get something other than a rose. Or maybe they can get something other than a pigeon out of that. That was his analogy. And initially, scientists said that is a phony analogy. That's a fraudulent analogy. A human pigeon breeder has a real brain with real intelligence and real volition that can make real choices. But Darwin, show me something in nature that is equivalent to a human brain. Nature's full of living things, but is nature alive? Does nature have a brain? Darwin, are you saying that nature has intelligence and nature has volition like this breeder? Darwin said, no, but it kind of works like one. And the scientist said, no, you can't even say that. But Darwin consistently used it over and over, and now nobody questions it. And the reason why Darwin loved that word, the reason why he loved to apply selective ability to nature, because he said it allowed nature to govern verbs. Think about what he's saying. Nature can govern verbs. What does he mean by govern? Govern verbs. Well, you can govern verbs. A verb is something you can do. Verbs are action words. Verbs are like act, favor, select. Those are all verbs. You can govern verbs because you have intelligence. He liked to apply selection because then it allows nature to do things as if it is acting even though it can't really do it. And that's how now when you read scientific papers, the best papers in the best journals, you will find them flooded without a second thought with nature doing things. Nature can cull. Nature can weed out. Nature can favor. Nature always acts on. Nature selects. And that is their causality. Nature is doing it. Thoughtful atheists say that is cheating. That's cheating. You just got God's action out and you smuggled in another one and you just projected it onto nature. That's cheating. And really thoughtful atheists say that that is just another type of religion. And really thoughtful creationists would say, you're right. That's just another type of religion, but instead of honoring and worshiping God, you honor and worship nature instead. And nature becomes your creator. And that sounds an awful lot like Romans chapter 1, verse 25, where it says, and they exchanged the truth Or says, the King James says, the truth of God for a lie. But literally in the Greek it says they exchanged the true for the false. The true for the false. The true what? In context, the true God for the false God. And then the rest of the verse makes really sense. And worshiped and served, liturgical terms, the creation more than the creator, who's blessed by his acts of creation forever and ever. Darwin just works this out. And all types of idolatry, this is why I said this is the most important part of the talk, all types of idolatry, all idolatry, always projects onto some inanimate, unconscious thing the ability to do verbs, to work verbs. So, if I were to hold up to you a statue, you would immediately see it. If I said, oh, this statue, if you just rub this statue, it can help you select your mate. You'd immediately say, oh, that's idolatry. If I held up a rabbit's foot, oh, you just rub this rabbit's foot, it'll do something for you. That's idolatry. When you turn to it in the Bible, it was Baal, it was Dagon. Dagon can do this. Dagon can do that. And idolatry, this is the main thing. Idolatry is not in the statue. Idolatry is not in the statue, and idolatry is not in Dagon. Idolatry is what the people think Dagon can do. It's what they believe Dagon can do. It's what they believe the statue can do. Idolatry doesn't exist in the statue. Idolatry exists where? In people's mind. That's where the idolatry is. Dagon is an idol, but the idolatry is in what all of those people thought Dagon could do. That's where the idolatry is. And idolatry today is in what all of these people think nature can do in lieu of God. Bingo. That's why this is the most important part of the lecture. You now understand why Darwinism and Darwinian selectionism is so bad. It does not give the credit for these incredible creatures to their creator, which it deserves. So they're robbing him of his credit. That's bad enough. But what's worse is not only do they not give it to him, but they give it to something else. And they give it to what he made. That's why it's so bad. That's why we can't even play around with it any more than you could play around with any type of idolatry. This is why Darwinian selectionism is fundamentally idolatrous and always will be idolatrous. As long as they keep applying that word selective ability to nature, they continuously project intelligence and volition onto nature, which it doesn't have. Hopefully I tried to explain that clear. Was that clear? That's why it's so bad. All right, we have a better explanation, a much better explanation. First of all, when I look at living things, they conform to the patterns of design. What do I mean by the patterns? First of all, if we were to turn on an engine back in the day when you could still see them, and you could open the hood, you would see patterns of design. You would see multiple parts working together for a purpose. That's what you would see on a running engine. You would see precise fit and finish. You would see precise timing for things. You would see a precise order of assembly. All of those things are patterns of design. You see them in an engine, and believe it or not, you see them in all of the creatures. You would see that all of their systems and all of those parts that are working together for a purpose are so complex that the probability of getting them randomly put together is essentially zero. And you would see many, many evidences of all or nothing unity, where unless all of the parts are in the right place at the right time and in the right amounts, nothing is going to work. And if someone says, well, give me one. Well, reproduction is one. Human reproduction. It's one that you know everybody has learned about. Everybody has to take courses in it in school. So you know that's an area of science where they're educated in. And then it's clear, it's obvious that unless you have dad's parts, mom's parts, and baby's parts, baby is just as important as mom. Baby's not going to build itself inside of mom unless mom parts are there, and mom will never even know that she's pregnant or operate pregnant until baby tells her that she's pregnant. So everything needs to be working in place or it doesn't work. And if you don't get reproduction right, you can't have evolution. So I generally say I am persuaded, and this is, you'll see why I put this in, that when the two mechanisms are put in a head-to-head test, that creation science offers a better, or I might even say more rational explanation for that. And really, that was just a way for me to put this gratuitous picture of my son in my talk right here. This picture was on the front page of the newspaper in our hometown because these are two crosstown rivals. And that's the goal line that they're there. And my son is number 30, who's putting this incredible stop on the running back of the opposite team right there. Now, down in Texas, they almost stand up and worship this kind of picture like that because they love football so much there. And that was a hit that you could hear all the way up in the stands that my son did in stopping this guy. He didn't suffer any brain damage, but you wouldn't know. Anyway, and on those kinds of things, no, that's not true. He didn't have brain damage. He went in the Navy. So there's that. Okay, and then finally, F, freedom found in creation science, this kind of freedom. So I usually transition with a little phrase that says, hey, let me detail a few positive aspects of creation science. One, freedom to follow the evidence wherever it leads. That's a great freedom. You know, I'm never worried that the science is going to lead away from that organisms are engineered or organisms are designed. I'm never worried about that. Never. So I'm free to follow the evidence wherever it leads there. But not all evolutionists are free to follow the evidence where it leads. A few years ago, they were having debates over creation and evolution in Kansas. And during that time, Scott Todd published in the paper Nature, that Nature is the world's leading scientific journal, he stated this: even if all the data point to an intelligent designer, such a hypothesis is excluded from science because it's not naturalistic. That's not freedom to follow the evidence. Even if all the data pointed to something, you're not gonna follow the data? You're not going to let it in? Who does that? What scientific field does that? You heard that I was an engineer. I never did that. You know, if data came to me that said these beams aren't going to be able to hold the snow load that comes on this roof, and they might fail, but I think we should build it anyway. Nobody does that. I'm a medical doctor. You know, what if all your tests, all your signs, all your symptoms, all your imaging studies, all the consultants, they all tell me that you have this disease. All the data is pointing to you having a disease. There's no doctor in the planet that's going to go up and say, well, I'm just going to disregard that, and I'm going to ignore that you might have this disease. Real scientists don't do this. But in the evolutionary world, they are willing to disregard all the data, even if it pointed to an intelligent designer. Here's another biggie. Freedom from magical words. Magical words on there. All of the words on the screen, I've pulled from scientific literature, not popular literature, right from the best technical journals. on there. And they'll say something like, these creatures arose, or something emerged, or appeared, or gave rise to, burst onto the scene, a miracle of evolution, and on and on and on. And even the last one, you see it all the time. This evolved too. This evolved too. What do you mean evolved too? You know what these words are? These words are magical because they're covering over a lot of missing data. It's easy to say something arose, but you want to know is how did it arise? You can claim something emerged, but you should really be giving me the step-by-step process by which you think it emerged. And to just put in your papers, it emerged. And it happens all the time. And most people aren't catching it. And so what I'd love to do, and I think I'll do it, when I was a kid, I had a thing called a clicker. It was like a piece of metal that when you bent it, when you pushed on it, you held it in your hand, it made this clicking sound. Click, 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 click. Did anybody have something like that? Probably my parents thought it was an obnoxious noise maker on those kinds of things. But I'm going to see if some company still makes those. And on the back, instead of printing like some creature or something, I'm going to print these words. On the back of it, I'm going to print all these words. And we're going to sell it for $1 out at the table. And parents can buy this for their kids so that they can listen to Nova. They can listen to National Geographic. They can listen to these shows. And when they hear these magical words, they can click, click, click. This will teach them to be active listeners and paying attention. Moms, you can even have a contest with your kids. Smart kid versus dumb kid or something like that. You know, you could just do that there, and this will teach them to be listening for these words. I guarantee you they're going to find them. So here's one from Stuart Kaufman. He's an eminent evolutionist. He wrote At Home in the Universe. Here's a paragraph I just pulled out. See if you can find any magic. 4 billion years ago, some conjury of molecules danced, blindly catalyzing one another's formation, reaching a critical diversity at which self-sustaining webs of reactions emerged and formed life. Blind, click, click, good, click, click, good. High five on that. Blind interactions gave rise to the emergent phenomenon of cellular life, cells linked in metabolic exchanges, blindly creating the first ecosystems. Those ecosystems have unfolded for over billions of years with a profusion of species emerging and passing into extinction, and at each level we sense emergent lawfulness in the profusion. Wow, you could have been clicking away on that. Or you might even catch a headline that says this: study of salamanders in ponds demonstrates the invisible finger of evolution. What do you mean, the invisible finger? I thought you were getting the magic out of science, but they haven't. They did the exact opposite. They pour all of this magic in. And most secularists are astounded when I'm doing a radio interview and I'm saying what we want to do is we want to bring some level of a level of maturity back into science, a level of rigor back into science by getting rid of the magic that evolution brings in. The interviewer's like, what? What do you mean? How did evolution bring magic? I thought it got it out. And then I start pouring over all of these magic words and things, and they're surprised. I like the freedom from the self-delusion that researchers must conclude that what they see is only an illusion of design, only an illusion. Here's a couple quotes. Richard Dawkins, in his book, The God Delusion, said, biology is the study of complicated things that have the appearance of having been designed for a purpose. Actually, he said that in The Blind Watchmaker, but he's the same one who mocked Christians with his book, The God Delusion. The study of complicated things that have the appearance of having been designed. His next book should probably be The Self-Delusion and not The God Delusion. Francis Crick, who was the co-discoverer of DNA, said biologists must constantly keep in mind that what they see was not designed, but rather evolved. That's just a type of burying your head in the sand and not being able to follow the evidence wherever it leads on that. I don't want to have to do that or be forced into it. And then finally, from religious conclusions that are masquerading as science. Well, what type of conclusions? Well, Carl Sagan, very popular, and he had a very, very popular series called Cosmos. He begins his book, and he began the series with this phrase: the cosmos is all that is, or ever was, or ever will be. That kind of sounds a little sciencey. The cosmos on there. Now, it's easy to want to argue or do things, but if Carl Sagan was still alive, I would say to him very respectfully, Dr. Sagan, you said the cosmos is all there is or ever was or ever will be. What experiment did you do? And what scientific paper did you publish it in which demonstrated that? No, there's no argument. I didn't argue with him. I just asked him, tell me what you did to prove this. And the answer is, he didn't do any experiment to prove this. In fact, you can't do an experiment to prove this. The experiment wouldn't even be over. This is Carl Sagan's religious beliefs. It's his religious beliefs that he has dressed up to sound like science so that he can bring the authority of science behind his beliefs. That is a trick. So, please work that phrase into your vocabulary. What experiment did you do? You don't even have to argument. What experiment did you do? What experiment did anybody do to demonstrate that? Michael Shermer, he's a skeptic. He's writing on Richard Dawkins, and in Scientific American he said, in one of the most existentially penetrating statements ever made by a scientist, Richard Dawkins, he's talking about Richard Dawkins, concluded that the universe, quote, that the universe we observe has precisely the same properties we should expect if there is, at bottom, no design, no purpose, no evil and no good, nothing but blind, pitiless indifference. Dr. Dawkins, you said there's no evidence of purpose, no evidence of good, no evidence of evil. You know, it'd be easy to just want to argue over that. I would just say, Dr. Dawkins, show me the experiment you did to show there's no purpose. How did you test for purpose? He didn't test for purpose. This is Richard Dawkins's beliefs. And it's being dressed up as science because Michael Shermer says in one of the most existentially penetrating statements made by a scientist. Happens all the time. Physicist Stephen Hawking. Everybody's heard of Stephen Hawking. He's passed away, but he was purported to be one of the smartest men on the planet. Stephen Hawking says there is no heaven. There is no heaven. Now, a lot of people, when Stephen Hawking speaks, they listen. He speaks, they listen. Well, how did Stephen Hawking come up with that? Well, he's comparing our brains to a computer. And it says this: Stephen Hawking, the world-renowned theoretical physicist, finds no room for heaven in his vision of the cosmos. The 69-year-old says, this was before he passed away, there is no heaven or afterlife for broken down computers. That is a fairy story for people afraid of the dark. He's talking about us. He says, you're afraid of dying. You're afraid of dying. You're afraid of what's going to happen after death. Therefore, you invented this whole story about heaven because you're afraid of dying. Well, if Stephen Hawking was still here, I would say to him very respectfully, Dr. Hawking, what experiment did you do for that? I mean, really, play it out in your mind. How would the experiment have to happen? Stephen Hawking would have to be alive, and then he'd have to what? He has to die. And then he has to look, oh, no heaven. Observation, no heaven. And then he has to do what? He's got to come back. And he's got to say to his friends, no heaven. I was just there. Nobody can do such a thing. This is his view. He says, you're afraid of dying, and that's why you've invented heaven. But I might say to him, Dr. Hawking, isn't it also possible that you may be afraid of meeting your maker, therefore you invent that there's no heaven? Maybe he's the one that's afraid and not you. Should be. But how many of you, if you had an opportunity, how many of you would like to have a chance to talk to Stephen Hawking right now? I would. I would. I wouldn't argue with him. And that, knowing particularly his limitation that he couldn't really argue in real time with me, but I would do the exact same thing. I would say, Dr. Hawking, let's get down to the basics. Now, this is what evolution is supposed to explain, the diversity of life on Earth, everything here. And you and I know that science is really an objective way of looking at the world based on observation and testing. And Dr. Hawking, I can tell you in all honesty, I have listened, and I've listened very closely to my teachers, and I've read carefully my textbooks. I've read all of the evidence that they've given to me, and I am what? Less than persuaded that what you're claiming is true. And I would go through those evidences. And I'd say I'm less than persuaded because you know as well as I know that nobody has come up with a natural origin of life. And you know as well as I know that nobody has ever observed one creature change to a fundamentally different kind. And Dr. Hawking, you know as well as I know there's not a scientific paper published anywhere on the planet to document how life got started or how one creature has ever changed to another type. These are fundamental things, Dr. Hawking, about what you claim to be true, and they are not backed up by observation and testing. And I would say, Dr. Hawking, you also hold to this view that nature somehow can select or act on creatures, but have you ever thought about it that is just a personification of nature where you have brought in something that can act just like God, that has agency that just like God? So how are you different than what I might believe in? I don't see any difference in all of those areas. And I'd say, and Dr. Hawking, I love the freedoms that come with what I believe without having to claim something arose or emerged or burst onto the scene. Dr. Hawking, are you satisfied with those explanations yourself? And Dr. Hawking, are you satisfied when you look at a bird or you look at a fish and you see all the design to just have to explain it away as if it's only an illusion? And aren't you aware that even some of your own statements, Dr. Hawking, are just science, are just your religious beliefs that you have dressed up to sound like science? So Dr. Hawking, that is reason. It's not religious belief. Those are very objective reasons why I'm less than persuaded that what you believe I should believe and that what you're selling I should buy. But if you just give me another 2 minutes, Dr. Hawking, to share with you, let me tell you what I believe about the Creator. And then I want to tell you who that Creator is. That Creator is your Maker, the Lord Jesus Christ, who not only is your Maker, but you know he died for you on your behalf and he is your Savior. Wouldn't you like to know him, Dr. Hawking? And that's where we want to go. That's where we want to go. And that's why I wish we had 5 minutes to talk with Dr. Hawking. And I hope you do too someday, whoever the Dr. Hawking is in your life. So thank you for the invitation to come here tonight, and I hope you can take this stuff and use it in the future.
Thank you. Aren't you glad you came out tonight? Yes? So on your way out, make sure that you do stop by the ICR table. And if they want to make donations to ICR, they just write a check to ICR or go to the website or something like that. Not directly to him, but to ICR for sure. Absolutely. One other thing we did, I believe, Jason, we recorded tonight, correct? So we will try to make this available to you if you'd like. It'll be on our YouTube channel at damascuscc.org. If you would like to get a notification of that, on the table out here through the doors to the right, there's a wood table that has something called communication cards. If you want to fill one of those out with your name and just put Dr. G on it, put it in the offering box out there, and then we will email you the link when it comes. So if you'd like to do that, communication card, fill it out, put it in the offering box, and we'll email that notification to you. I want to pray for you and for your ministry, and then also pray for all of us as we hopefully use these tools with those around us who need to hear the truth. And so would you join me in prayer as we close? Father, thank you so much for tonight. Thank you for what we've learned. Thank you for the ministry of ICR. Thank you for your servant, Dr. Guliuzza. Thank you for how you have trained him and led him. Thank you for grabbing hold of his heart to turn him to you as a faithful follower of you. And thank you for tonight's lesson that we've been able to learn how to use your creation, which you've made, what is right in front of us, what we can observe, to lead people back to show them who you are, Jesus, what you've done for them, to die for them, that you created all of this as a gift to us to enjoy. And Lord, even though we broke it through sin, that you did the work to come back and to fix it and to offer a way for us to have a life with you. Lord, we don't want to miss the opportunity to point to Jesus and the cross, even as we talk about creation. So would you help us? Would you help us to have good conversations with people who need to hear the truth? Would you help us to be gracious and loving? Would you help us to be those who have the aroma of Christ as we do that? And then may we be bold to point people to the cross, to point people to the resurrection, to point people, including those who are like Dr. Hawking in our lives, to the good news that there is life eternal, there is hope in Jesus Christ. And so we thank you for that. Thank you for this night. Lord, please protect us and bless us as we go. In Jesus' name. Everybody said? Amen. Thank you for coming.